Okay, this is an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York. It is the 3rd of February 2004, approximately 1:30 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Frederick Longe, L-O-N-G-E. I was born in Herkimer, New York, in October of the 25th, 1920.
Okay, what was your educational background prior to entering military service?
I was a graduate of Union College in civil engineering. I have a Bachelor of Science in civil engineering.
Okay. Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
I was still in college at the time, and at that particular day, I lived with an aunt, and I happened to be up in a room with a couple of my classmates when we heard about Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm. Was it on the radio?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. What was your reaction? What was the reaction of the group of you to the news?
I don't recall that there was any overexcitement at the time. I think we were sorely disappointed. I think at that time we felt that those crazy Japanese at the time, and I don't want to say that today, mm-hmm. but I think that's what we felt. Mm-hmm. I don't have a recollection of really any strong feelings about the war at that time, although a couple of my classmates went right off and enlisted. I did not. I wanted to get my degree, and I don't recall anything that really stirred. There were 3 of us living together that stirred us up, really. Okay.
Did you enlist, or were you drafted?
No, I enlisted.
Why did you enlist, and why did you select the Navy?
I enlisted because the draft board was looking for me. Back in August of 1942, I received a letter from my mother while I was working in Virginia and West Virginia for AT&T, in which she said that the draft board was looking for me and that I had better either come home and enlist or be aware of the fact that they wanted me. So when I received that letter, I was not far from Washington. I went into Washington and went to the Naval Department and enlisted in the Navy.
Why did you pick the Navy?
I really can't tell you why I picked the Navy. I think probably because I didn't want to be a soldier.
Okay. Did you go into any kind of officer training program with a college degree?
I went to indoctrination school at Dartmouth College, and I was there from September through December of 1942.
Okay. Where did you go from Dartmouth?
From Dartmouth, I went to the Boston Navy Yard and took up courses in anti-submarine warfare work. I became an anti-submarine warfare officer. I took a course in Boston, and following that I was sent down to Key West, Florida for further training in anti-submarine warfare work. While in Key West, we worked with live submarines. And from Key West, Florida, I went to San Diego, to the Naval Air Base, or the Naval Base at San Diego, and took further training in anti-submarine warfare work. And again, we worked with submarines. Subsequent to that, I was sent to back east coast to the Boston Navy Yard, and subsequently I was assigned to the USS Wilkes, DD-441, a U.S. destroyer, for temporary duty on the Wilkes as anti-submarine warfare officer.
What was Wilkes' station? Was it off the American coast?
At that time, it was Atlantic and the Mediterranean. Okay. We did convoy work to the Panama Canal, and subsequently we took a convoy to North Africa to Iran. And the ship basically was an escort vessel most of the time, but then it engaged in many battles. I was only involved in one, both in the Mediterranean and in the Pacific.
What kind of battle were you involved with was it in the Mediterranean?
Yes, pardon me. Originally we went to Iran and dropped a convoy off at Iran, and then we went to Bizerte and prepared the ship for duty at the invasion of Sicily. And while in Bizerte we had air raids, and according to our book, we shot down a couple of planes, a couple of German planes, and then we went to the invasion of Sicily, and we did shore bombardment work in Sicily and fought off German aircraft, shot one plane down, and I have a story about that one. But one thing that happened to us, when we went into the port of Bizerte, the Germans had sunk a great many vessels in the harbor, coming in the channel, going in. And when we went in, we had to take aboard a French pilot. They would not let us go in without a pilot, and our captain was quite upset about that. But nevertheless, we went in, and didn't we run aground with the pilot aboard. And in my case, fortunately, we ran aground and fouled up our starboard prop. Because, I say fortunately in my case, eventually I came back to the States. We fixed up the starboard prop in Bizerte so that we could proceed to Sicily. But the prop was damaged to the extent we could only go at 15 knots. So after the invasion of Sicily, the Wilkes had to come back to the United States for repair, and that was the extent of, but that was an interesting experience because it got me back to the States much earlier than it would have before. One of the ships in our division later on went up to Italy and was sunk.
Now you had mentioned reference to an attack by German aircraft off Sicily?
In Sicily and also in Bizerte. They were German bombers. And while we were in Sicily doing shore bombardment work, one night, especially one night, we were being bombarded by German bombers, and we happened to shoot down a plane. And I happened to be in the identification group. And I saw the plane come down, and we tried to identify the plane, And at that time we identified it as an old Italian liner, carrier of some kind. And it was not until in the middle of the 1950s that I read an article in the Reader's Digest that during those 2 or 3 days we shot down 21 of our own aircraft. And as I reflect back on what I saw, this is my own personal opinion. I've never heard anything otherwise contrary to it. Based on what I saw, I happen to think we shot down one of our own aircraft that were sent over. What happened, according to the Reader's Digest article, the planes that were going to drop paratroops over this particular area of Sicily got lost, and they flew north of the island of Sicily and had to turn around and come back from north to south, and we were south of Sicily. And when they came back, we were in the middle of an air raid. And that's whenever you saw an aircraft, you shot at it. And there were no question, there were German bombers. But as I say, that according to the Reader's Digest, and I've since checked some of the records, we did shoot down 21 of our own aircraft.
After you arrived back to the States, now the Wilkes could only make 15 knots across the Atlantic?
15 knots.
Where were you transferred after you left the Wilkes?
Well, let's see. When I left the Wilkes, I was sent for further training for a little while in Boston, at the Boston Navy Yard, still in anti-submarine warfare work. And after a very short period of time, I was sent to Bermuda to the destroyer escort shakedown group, where we shook down new ships with new crews and ran them through all sorts of training exercises. And I was the anti-submarine warfare officer and trained crews in anti-submarine warfare work. And I was in Bermuda for 9 months or so, and was transferred back to Boston for further training. And while I was there, I enrolled for a course in naval architecture at the University of Michigan, and I was accepted by the Navy, and I spent probably 5 or 6 months at the University of Michigan studying naval architecture, which was a postgraduate course. And subsequent to that, upon graduation, I was sent to the Brooklyn Navy Yard and received training in ship maintenance. And I was to be sent over to the Pacific to a naval base for maintenance, repair, ship repair. And then the war ended, and I was discharged in December of 1945, and I had 2 months of leave coming. And that's the breadth of my experience.
Okay, now you mentioned in the form that you wrote that you were under attack by a torpedo once. You had a...
It wasn't quite a torpedo. I happened to be officer of the deck at the time, and it was at night.
Now this was while you were on the Wilkes, or?
This is while I was on the USS Wilkes. We were just short of Gibraltar, and I forget the hour of the night. It was late at night, and one of the outlookers on the starboard bow suddenly yelled, "Torpedo! Torpedo! Torpedo!" And I ran out to the to the deck to take a look, and it was much too close to have done anything to avoid it. But as it turned out, it was a school of porpoises, and it left a wake in the water with the effervescence in the water, the bubbles at night, and I have to say that the sailor that was there did the right thing. He thought it was a torpedo. And then when we saw it come out on the other side of the boat and saw what it really was, it was a school of porpoises.
Now, when you were back from Europe, where were you when you heard about the death of President Roosevelt? Do you recall that?
No. What?
I think it was April 12th.
April 45. I was just wondering.
I'm trying to think of where I was.
Well, do you remember having a reaction when you heard about his death at all?
I honestly don't recall
Okay.
the circumstances at the time.
Yeah. Did you have a reaction to the victory in Europe?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It was incredible.
Where were you at that time?
I was in New York.
Uh-huh.
I had just gotten out of the University of Michigan, and was in New York working at the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Did you recall having a reaction when you heard about the dropping of the atomic bombs on Japan?
Only how wonderful it was. But in retrospect, I don't know whether we were right or wrong.
Okay. When you left the service, did you ever make use of the GI Bill?
Only in a matter of veterans insurance. That's all.
Did you ever purchase a home using it? Do you recall?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Did you ever use the 5220 Club?
No.
Did you ever use the, you said you went to ship the architectural schools and so on. Did you ever use that at all in your work afterward? I know it says you went into construction. Did you?
No, I didn't. Much of what we did at the University of Michigan covered work that I had already covered in undergraduate school, but it was all applied to shipbuilding and ship construction.
Right. Yes.
It was a little more in depth, but it was geared more to mechanical engineering than it was civil engineering, which I was when I graduated. So what I learned in Naval Architecture School did not contribute.
Okay. Did you ever join any veterans organizations?
No.
You still have not joined any?
No.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
No.
Okay. Did you ever see any USO shows while you were in the service?
Oh, yes.
Do you recall did you ever see any famous persons?
I recall Eddie Duchin one time. That was while I was in Bermuda. We saw a lot of shows while I was in Bermuda. Saw a couple over in Bizardi. But nothing nothing, nothing of a large size at all. No, I did not. As I say, I saw a few while we were in Bermuda. I did see a couple. But that was the extent of it, really.
How would you say your time in the service changed or affected your life? Do you think it did, and how?
Well, it affected my life to a great extent because I got married while I was in Bermuda.
Oh, you did?
I married a Bermuda girl, and that was in 1944, and this year in 2 months we'll celebrate our 60th wedding anniversary. So I gained a lot from from my service in Bermuda, and while I was in Michigan in school, our oldest daughter was born in 1945. So, as I said earlier, you know, I was one of the fortunate people.
Were you able to bring her back into the United States?
Yes, I did.
Right away as a...
I brought her back when I was shipped out to Boston. She came up to New York, and I had a couple of days leave, and we went up to my hometown of Herkimer, and she stayed up there for a little while, and then I brought her to Boston, and and we were there, and then I brought her to Ann Arbor, Michigan, when I was at the University of Michigan.
Okay. Did you have some things to show us? Do you have any photographs of yourself while you were in service?
I haven't brought any of those photographs with me. I wrote a little, very brief diary from the time we left New York to go to Iran, and then to Sicily, and then back. And I've rewritten it. I copied it verbatim, but what I did is I incorporated some comments from the book on the USS Wilkes, which I have here.
If you hold that up in front of just in front of you, Wayne will be able to focus on that. Now, when was that published?
This was published recently. I say no. No, I'm not sure. Let's see when it was published. 1997.
Oh.
And it was published and put together by a fellow by the name of Mosier. And what he did was got different stories from different crew members, put them together in here, and then of course he had access to the log of the USS Wilkes, and he used that in writing the story. And it's and what I tried to do for those particular days and hours that he mentions in here, I tried to incorporate them in what I wrote in this, in my World War II diary, and that just covered that short period of time. And there's and I've got this down, Fred's tour aboard the USS Wilkes, DD 441. But you see what I did? I copied from my diary, and then I excerpt from the book, and I put them in there so that they would coordinate the story, if anybody is interested in that kind of a story. But I have to, reading some of the things that I have been reading, and especially after reading this book, The Flyboys, and seeing what or hearing about what happened to some of our people over in the Pacific and what we subsequently did. Kind of gives you a different feeling about what war is about and what it shouldn't be about. It certainly, at that time, looking at the records, what the Japanese did to our people was unforgivable. But for them, it was part of their life. That's the way they were brought up at that time. And you've probably heard this more than I've just realized this. We consider them to be savages, and the Japanese people at the civilian level were taught that we were savages. And this is what they were fighting. They were fighting savages. And when we learned what they were doing to our people, from what I've read in the book, we did much the same thing. Now we didn't dismember prisoners. We treated them in accordance with the treaties, the worldwide treaties at the time. But from what I read, our destruction of Tokyo and other parts of Japan were deliberate and directed at killing civilians for the purpose of bringing them to their knees, of bringing the nation to their knees. Because those people felt that we were savages, and that's all they knew about us. They didn't know anything else.
Well, thank you very much for your interview.
When I was going to say, when you came back, were you on the ship when the war ended?
No. I was in the New York Navy Yard when the war ended.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, I heard that when the war ended, a lot of the supplies and that were on board ship were just tossed overboard.
Tossed overboard. That's right. Oh, another interesting thing that when you received the Jeep 2 weeks ago, was it?
Mm-hmm.
That you got the Jeep?
Yes.
It brought back to mind while I was in Bermuda, there happened to be a submarine that was returning from North Africa. And the commander of that submarine, while he was in Africa, had a Jeep dismantled and brought aboard a submarine and brought it back to the United States. And at that time in Africa, you talk about things being thrown out. You know, there were Jeeps all over the place. Mm-hmm. And there was gasoline. You could pick up a Jeep and go drive around somewhere and fill a tank with gasoline and go and drive off. So that captain got himself a Jeep for free.